Now that I've had a good look at this photo and I've worked out what I think are the dimensions, pretty good idea of what I think the dimensions are, I've actually had a crack at hand drawing Sketchup. It's just going to make my life easier when I start drawing. So you can see I did a rough measurement. Initially I thought it was 4 meters, but when I looked back and measured this one, 900 is a standard dimension, 21 is a standard dimension, and the 900 again, so 3900 overall. We think that that door is probably 2400, and just looking proportionally, it's another meter, maybe it's 900 above that. Also flicking between the photographs, I'm going to have an idea that the mullions that we can see around are approximately 30 mil, and I'm going to guess that the head is about 200. Now I've flicked through a couple of other photos, but you can see that the mullion goes up there and there, and there's not one in the centre. Okay, so that's what I've got to look at. So starting with this hand-drawn sketch, just going to make it easier to set this curtain wall up from the beginning. I know that I'm going to need some 30 by 30 mullions, and I may have one already, or I may need to create a thicker mullion for this 200, but let's start. Can you also see that the red dash lines are where we need to place our mullions? So we'll have a look in a minute as I draw my curtain wall. The red dash lines are where our grid lines are going to be. So the grid lines are what we place a mullion on, and they need to be generated before. Now, looking back at this photo, I'm doing this very first corner. So I'm coming into this area here, and I'm choosing curtain wall. Now I could do this as a variety of families, fixed windows that are popped together. I just find it very easy to be able to generate this. I'm choosing wall, and I'm coming down, and you can see right down the bottom here we've got a choice of 2 curtain walls. Now I know that storefront is one that comes in with grids and mullions already generated, and the curtain wall 6mm thick glazing comes in simple as just a piece of glass, and then we go and add what we need. So that's the one I'm choosing today. Now before I start, I'm going to edit type, I'm going to duplicate, I'm going to call it Assignment 1 Storefront 1, and that's because as I looked through the photos before, I noticed that each store varies substantially. So I'm going to create this one because I might need to they change in size and that's okay, but if they change in other ways, I'll just give myself the opportunity to make some more. Very important that I click the automatic embed. That means as I create my curtain wall that it cuts a hole out the same size in the wall that I'm drawing it in. And I start in the centre of the wall. I'm going to type in 3900. Okay, first one. Looking at this shop front, I can see that there's a column on the other side of this door opening that we're starting to create, and there's another one further on. So I'm going to position this one, or I have positioned this one. You can see I've positioned it just on the other side. Notice I'm just going to change to shaded view using the hotkeys SD. You can see that as I hover over this curtain wall, it's offset, and I actually want that to sit smack bang in the middle of the centre line. So I'm going to use my tab key to select the curtain wall. So I'll just show you that again, curtain wall system panel glaze. I'm coming into properties and I'm typing in edit type, and I just want to set this, I'm not bothering to duplicate, I want it to change for all of these. The offset to 0 and the thickness to 10. Now I need to make this look right. So in the south elevation, you can see that it's quite tall. The overall height needs to be 3400, 24 plus 1000. Okay, so I'm just typing into the temporary dimensions, 3400. Now if I view this in a shaded view, SD is the hotkeys, you can see that this is starting to come together. However, I prefer to view it back in this wireframe so I can see the whole curtain wall. Alright, so back into my ground floor, I'm going to break this wall up. In fact, I'm going to pop back into my 3D view now that I think about it. The awning's annoying me. I'm just going to hide that in view for the moment. So I'm just right clicking on the awning, hide in view elements. Okay, now that beyond is actually the wall. Don't be confused to think that that is part of our curtain wall. So what I need to do, I'm just going to flick back to my photograph again. I need to break this wall up into vertical components of 9,021 and 900, and 2,400 and 1,000. So I need to put grid lines where you can see the. In the Architecture tab, I'm going to select Curtain Grid, and I'm putting in 2 vertical grids and 1 horizontal. I'll come back, I'm going to hit my Escape key a couple of times. I'll use my Tab key to select the grid line. There we go, 900. And then I'll select this grid line. Notice I didn't bother adjusting this one, because then I would have a little tug of war going back and forth. And that should, if that one's 900, that should add up to 2,100. I'm going to select the grid line here, and that should be 2,400. So we need to have these grid lines in place before we can add mullions. You'll notice that there's some mullions that have already been loaded in as part of our architectural template. So I've got a 50 by 150. If I have a look at my choices, I've got a 30mm square and a quad mullion. So I've got a few, and if I was to go into the library, there'd be a number of other sizes and shapes. However, the 30mm square is perfect for what we need. If we look back to our drawing, you can see we made a note that they were probably around 30 by 30 mullions. If we flick back to our photograph, we can see that they're going to be around there and what looks like above the door as well. So I'm going to select those two, 30mm square, and if I choose grid line segment, it will be the entire grid line. If I choose grid line, it will be the entire grid line. If I choose segment, it'll be one part of it, and if I choose all grid lines, it'll put it over everything. So I'll probably choose grid line. So I'm putting it on the edges. You can't see that happening. I might just zoom in a little better. Down the bottom, along the top, and I might pop back to my south elevation for the last one. So mullion, 30mm. And we've got one down the bottom. I'm going to deal with that in just a minute. Now here, if we have a look back, we can remember that there was a fairly large head. We thought that that was probably, we being me, 200mm high, and we want it to be a 2400 standard high. So therefore, with this mullion, we actually want to make sure that that mullion sits on the grid and goes up by 200. So the mullion, or the head that's going to run along this grid line, I want it to sit 200 above. So I'm coming back up to Architecture, Build, Mullion. I'm going to Edit Type and Duplicate. I'm going to call it 50 wide by 200 high. So the total thickness is 200. Can you see that if I change, this is when it's centered, so I'm going to change it so that the width on side 1 is 0 and the width on side 2 is 200, so that it's not centered on that grid line, that it starts at the bottom and moves up. Right, it's starting to come together. Now, last but not least, I've got 2 things to do. I want to get rid of this mullion, because that's where our door is. And you can see that obviously we don't want people tripping over a mullion. And then the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to swap this glass panel out. So far we're looking at, let me just get my tab key. Right, when you see that symbol, that means that you've selected the entire curtain wall. These are our individual mullions, which can be removed or deleted. There's our head. If I hit the Tab key, you'll see that's the grid line. And then in addition to that, we've got something called the Glaze Panel, a bit of glass that sits in between it, except it doesn't need to be glass. It can actually be a number of things. However, when this family that is about to go into the system panel glaze goes in, it must be made as I'm about to insert a door. I'm going to load in some doors from the Autodesk library that comes with the automatic download. So if I go to Insert, Load Family, Curtain Wall Panels, you can see that there's a choice of 3 here. I'm going to choose the Curtain Wall Storefront. I can see that through the preview. And I'm going to hit the Tab key. Now, if it doesn't select the first time, just move to another part of the door, but always near the edge. System panel glazed, and I'm going to select the double storefront, double door. And you can see that it's automatically going to adjust to the width and the height to fit those 2 doors in. Just to finish the door off, you can see that this head should be continuous. So I'm going to click on this mullion, and I'm going to click up here in our contextual tab, Make Continuous. Now that I've completed this part of the shop front, you can see I can now use the same methodology to create this area, which is just one fixed curtain wall panel with the mullions around. And again here, remember I was going to go and find in the Revit library and online these sliding doors, but here you can see they're the same doors that we've just applied. So looking at each shop individually, looking at each one of those photographs, we'll be able to get an idea of the size and the information required. So I'm going to finally unhide that awning that I hid earlier by clicking on this little icon down here. You can see there's the window that appears. I'm going to unhide the element, and then I need to toggle and reveal the hidden element modes. All right, so that was the light bulb down the bottom. All right, reveal hidden elements, and then you need to select the item and toggle it off. You can see over here I've created a 3D view. So now the whole building is starting to come together and hopefully looking a little bit like what is currently there. Keeping in mind that we're deliberately keeping some of the detail away from the awnings because we're going to lose that information.